Hello. I was going to title this presentation, I'm not a marketer, but I play one at SSP. But, despite that fact, I really was delighted to be asked to participate here today, both to have the opportunity to highlight some of the work that BioOne's been doing, but also certainly to learn from my fellow panelists some of the great things their organizations are doing in connecting to end users. And I think in some of our discussions, and perhaps you'll agree from what you've heard so far, I think there really is one theme, but it's twofold. Certainly this is a discussion that's about big data and about analytics, but, and this is where my title comes in, it's also about this cultivating of a relationship and building trust, and sometimes one user at a time. So for those of you who aren't familiar, BioOne is a nonprofit scientific publisher. Our chief product is BioOne Complete, which is a full-text aggregation of 190 science journals in the biological, ecological, and environmental sciences. And so these are titles mainly published by scientific societies, but also some museums and institutes and university presses from around the world. So BioOne was founded in 1999 by both a group of society publisher interests as well as library interests. So the chief goal was to provide both of these core stakeholder groups with a nonprofit alternative for online distribution of science journals. So for the first decade of our operations, our marketing focus was squarely on these two audiences. When it came to selling to libraries, it really was a fairly traditional approach of dealing mostly with acquisitions librarians and sometimes subject librarians, and in the case of existing subscribers, trying to get them to encourage usage so that the subscription would be maintained, and in the case of prospective libraries, trying to encourage them to take a trial or talk to their faculty and see if we could get some interest generated that way. So we were obviously aware of end users during this time, but we didn't have that direct relationship with them. And we were somewhat reluctant to forge those connections. But I think it becomes clear that you don't have a relationship with end users at your own peril. And if you don't get this reference, then you're probably a millennial. No. Like many of us, BioOne's relationship with libraries as our core customers is really paramount. So when I say that we were reluctant to deal with end users directly, much of this reluctance was that as a nonprofit and a library-founded one at that, we never wanted to seem like we were going around libraries to kind of go behind their back and deal directly with users. But at this time, we were also starting to experience a number of what we would later come to see as related challenges. So discoverability issues, general loss of usage, and overall just a fear that our brand, the BioOne brand, wasn't really being heard in the marketplace. And this wasn't good timing because also with tightening library budgets, things like cost per download was increasingly important. So if your usage is going down, your cost per download's going up, it's not a good thing. And also if your brand is not well known in the marketplace and you're trying to generate new sales, it also becomes very difficult if a researcher doesn't have that kind of brand identity to go to their librarian and say, this is a resource that I want, or could you get a trial for this? So with all of these indicators, it really became very clear that we needed to forge those direct connections with end users because they were the ones that were really interacting with the content and the ones that ultimately were generating usage. So we needed to underscore that critical bond between content, product, and organization. So just to summarize, our kind of initial marketing focus that we used really relied on educating librarians on the benefits of BioOne and hoping that they would encourage usage among their end users. And a shift to end user marketing really says this is a difficult proposition, especially if you're not a giant must-have commercial product. So librarians, as we know, are incredibly overworked individuals with so many different priorities. And even if they believe in your mission, even if they like your product, it's probably not a sustainable long-term solution to have them be the one that are always bringing that to market. So ultimately, you really need both approaches. You need to be marketing directly to libraries and end users, and you need these approaches to be linked. So for BioOne, this really meant that reaching out to end users would always happen with the consent and collaboration of librarians, so that they never felt like we were going around their interests. And appreciation of cultural differences we found was also really, really key, because in some markets, the librarians would say, absolutely, please go to my end users. It's one less thing for me to do. You're welcome to reach out to them. And then in others where they really saw their role as gatekeeper, they were somewhat reluctant to have us do this. So a core part of our strategy, and I would suggest as part of yours, is really making sure that you're always checking in back with your library community, whether that's directly with your subscribing librarians or through a librarian advisory group, and just making sure that you're approaching things very carefully and with respect. And in general, we just wanted to make sure that any gains that we made with the end user community didn't come at the expense of our strong relationships with libraries. So who are these end users that we're desperate to be in a long-term relationship with? They aren't one homogeneous group, and acknowledging their various intersections and user identities is really important. So they aren't just researchers at subscribing institutions or prospective institutions. They may also be authors or corporate users or society members or all of the above. And so this is where that data really comes in handy, because having this identity data and understanding overlaps and distinctions is really critical for these e-campaigns in making sure that the messages can be targeted. So some organizations may have this type of data already available, or some may have a big staff that can kind of harvest this. But for BioOne, as a relatively small organization, it's always been most time and cost effective to purchase lists. So we work with Thomson Reuters, but certainly there are a number of products available. And the benefit of these lists is that authors have agreed to be sent this information, so you're not at risk of running afoul of any anti-spamming laws. So I know I've talked a lot about strategy, so I just wanted to give you kind of a practical glimpse of what a campaign might look like. So in this example, we wanted to do an awareness campaign with a specific subset of users, so entomological researchers that had published in BioOne titles. So specifically, we wanted to let them know that their paper could be accessed on BioOne, and a bit about our mission and business model. And it was also a call to action for those at non-subscribing institutions to let their libraries know to put us on a wish list. And I'll talk about that terminology in a minute. We also encourage them to sign up for BioOne alerts, sign up for the newsletter, follow us on Twitter. Again, anything really to solidify that relationship and strengthen a preference for usage on the BioOne platform. And as an aggregation, since much of our content is available in multiple places, that's really the key thing we're aiming at, is this understanding on the part of the researcher that their content is available on BioOne and that this is a great place to access it. So to achieve this campaign, what we did is provide a list of our entomology journals to Thomson Reuters. They created a list of authors that had published papers in these journals within the last 18 months and had agreed to be contacted in this manner. We put together the creative that you see here, and then the emails ultimately go through Thomson's service bureau so that the privacy of the authors is maintained and you're less likely to have this treated as spam. The Service Bureau offers different personalization options, and they also offer analytics, which are obviously key to make sure that in subsequent campaigns, you're really making incremental improvements over time. So some lessons learned from this and other e-campaigns. First, keep it simple. Promote one message or one call to action per campaign. If you try to do too much shouting, your whole message is going to be drowned out. So really try to resist the urge to do everything at once in one campaign. Also try to maintain a consistent look and feel. Consistency in formatting and even in narrative voice will strengthen your brand and again create that sense of familiarity among your recipients. And tailor your content to your audience as much as possible, making sure that the information you're sending them is specific and relevant. One of the things that I personally don't understand is when people send a message that says, "Does your library subscribe?" Well, you should know that. I don't want to. So really be careful, what type of kind of pithy marketing you do. Have a call to action, but again, choose your words really carefully. And this is what I was getting at when I said can you put us on a wish list, or can you explore a trial? These are kind of probably more respectful approaches than the tell your library to subscribe. Again, you want to stay on the good side of librarians, so be careful of the kind of things you're reaching out with. Test your subject lines. So you can do this by sending the exact same email to a small subset of users before you do your big marketing push and see what the click-through and open rates are, and then use whatever the most catchy subject line was for your big marketing push. And lastly, be guided by the data, try to learn from every campaign, but don't confuse high open and click-through rates with effective marketing. And this is where this idea of gimmicks comes in that you might have a gimmick that generates a lot of one-term usage, but that's really not what you're going for. You want to build that long-term relationship with a user that's going to come back and back again. And just a reminder that end-user marketing isn't just about email campaigns. It's a variety of other methods and branding exercises, including social media engagement, conference presence, training, site testing, user feedback, and even personalized customer service. Again, it's this idea of micro-marketing, that sometimes it's just having one user have a really good experience. So ultimately, it's everything that's going to solidify your relationship with the end users, generate loyalty, and in turn, build usage. And so just some closing thoughts. First, try to stand out from the crowd, but be yourself and assert your brand. So we all get tons of solicitations. I know that I did before this meeting, as did many of you. But the good news is that this makes us all the perfect judge for what works and what doesn't, what immediately gets trashed, and what makes us want to click through and open. I know for me, it's all about trust. It's those organizations or individuals that I know have my best interests at heart, that have those products or services that meet my needs. Make every approach specific, targeted, and personalized. So don't waste your time or theirs on a bad fit. Customize your approach, but don't be creepy. You don't want to assume too much knowledge of your user. I always say you want to make sure that the user knows it's 2016, not 1984. So you don't need a lot of money if you have a great personality. So understand your resources and work within your means. So you may not be in a position to buy lists, but you might have an intern program that can harvest data, or you might have a researcher advisory group, or you might have a great, lively social media presence. So there are so many different ways that you can make an impact with end users, and so leverage your assets. And last and most importantly, be in it for the long game. So not short-term validation. Ultimately, you are looking for that long-term loyal relationship with users with whom you just click. So, thank you.